2, we looked at the statement of Jesus, I was a stranger and you invited me in. We looked at the issues of dislocation, of loneliness, of immigrants, of refugees. We looked at our own loneliness and what it is that we're meant to do about that. That was week 2. Then we looked at the statement of Jesus, I was sick and you looked after me. We looked at the AIDS, the global AIDS and tuberculosis epidemics. Interestingly, I was just talking with someone recently who came back from a pastors' conference in Zambia, and they said, get this, 60% of a pastor's time in Zambia is spent on AIDS-related funerals. That's extraordinary. You think about that. I don't know if it's true for you, Morris, but I mean, I'd say maybe 1% or 2% of my time is spent on all types of funerals here in New Zealand. But 60% of a pastor's time in Zambia is spent on funerals just for people who have AIDS. That's extraordinary. That gives you an idea of how huge this is. And we looked at that week at a special place in God's heart the sick have. Like the cripple who ate at David's table. You remember his name, Mephibosheth. That was week 3. And then over week 4, which was your last week, we looked at the statement of Jesus, I was a prisoner and you came to visit me. We looked at the relative failure of modern prison systems and why we should care about people who are in prisons. We looked at what we can do, what we should do. We realized that Jesus chose to identify with these people even though they don't deserve it. Even though it's probably their own fault that they are where they are. That was week 4. And in each of these weeks, for people who are hungry, who are poor, who are strangers, who are sick, who are in prison, we found out that Jesus said, whatever you do for them, you do for me. We found out that how we treat people on the very bottom rung of the ladder has eternal consequences. Jesus wanted to leave us in absolutely no doubt that this subject was incredibly, extremely, eternally important to him. So my question is, given all that you've read, given all that you've heard, given all that you prayed about and talked about and thought about, what does all of that do to that value system? What difference does it make to that value system that many of us hold to? What needs to change in that value system, given what you've read and what you've heard over the last 5 weeks? I want to give you another chance to talk to the person next to you. You've got 60 seconds. Tell them what it is that you think difference, all the stuff that you've read and heard, makes to that value system. 60 seconds, off you go. Well, again, I'm not sure what it is that you think. I'm not sure what it is that you said to the person next to you. I'd love to hear. I do think there's an obvious response to make. A response that is really, really clear. What we need to do is add in a new value. At the highest level of who we are, we need to put in something else that counts to us. A value at least as important as our independence. A value at least as important as our security. A value that's at least as important as our happiness. It's a value that parallels our need to look after our family, that parallels our need to honor God and live for Him. It's a value of compassionate action. It gets layered in onto this set of values and says that in addition to doing all of those other things, we'll make it one of our topmost priorities to care for the hungry, to care for the lonely, to care for the sick, to care for the prisoner. This response of layering on another value onto the set of values that we already have, the response of adding compassionate action to the other things in your life, I think it's the most obvious, the most sensible response we can make to the words of Jesus that we've been looking at over the last 6 weeks. And I want to suggest to you this morning that it is completely wrong. Completely wrong. I do not think that Jesus' words we've been studying in the last 6 weeks bring such a small, incremental adjustment, such a minor change to the value system that we, you and me both, live by. I believe that Jesus' words blow that value system to smithereens and show it up for the flawed, secular understanding that it really is. You see, the problem with that set of values is that in reality, it is not that much different from the set of values held by every other white, middle-class Kiwi in the country. I mean, everyone values family, don't they? Family counts. Family matters to your average middle-class Kiwi. Everyone values security. Everyone wants to be safe. Everyone wants to protect their family. Everyone values happiness. Everyone values independence. And let's be honest, most people look to create some kind of meaning in their life as well. Most people have some kind of framework or understanding that explains who they are, why they're here. Most people call on a higher power when they're stuck, when they need some help, when they can't see a way forward. Many of them even layer on a sense of compassionate action. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to help others. Don't you think it's extraordinary, knowing what we do, we've ended up with a system of values that's not that different from anyone else in New Zealand? I mean, think of what we're part of here. Think of what we affirm as we come here to worship this morning. We believe that this space, this planet has been invaded. We believe that the God who created us and whom we've all rejected gave up his rights as God, gave up all the pleasures of heaven, and somehow he squeezed his immortality into a 9-pound Jewish baby. And that 9-pound Jewish baby grew up and became a man. He spent 3 years teaching us how much God loved us, and then we killed him, and he let us. He let us do it so that God could pour out his wrath on our sinfulness. He let us do it because he knew he was being punished for our rejection, and he was making us a way to get drawn up into the glory of God. And now our earth, because of what he did, is filled not just with one human who has God inside him, but literally millions upon millions of humans whose God has squeezed his immortality into their flesh by his Spirit. God in us as a guarantee that when this world ends, our lives won't end, and we will live for him forever and ever. That's what we believe. That's what we affirm as we come here to worship this morning. We believe that we're part of God's extraordinary story, and believing that, we still allow our lives to be defined by values that are not that different from the people who are around us and who have no knowledge of the story that we know of. That's a travesty. How could we have let that happen? How could God have become kind of another discipline that gets added to a balanced budget and exercise for maintaining a healthy and productive lifestyle? How could we have allowed the world so much to define what's important to us when we should have been defined by our place in God's story? You see, the reality is those things there, they're not even real. Those values, they're not real. I mean, independence. You think you're independent? You think you chose, I don't know, the clothes you're wearing this morning? You think that was your choice? Well, think again. Have a look at this. The truth is out. Even the world is starting to see this. You read a book like Vance Packard's Hidden Persuaders, and you realize it's an illusion. You have no choices. You're a cork floating on the tide of social opinion. You're subject to a heap of forces that you have got no control over. You don't have to value your independence. There's something else to value apart from the world's system of pretend choices. You can delight in the sovereignty of God. You can say, that's what counts. That's what matters. That's what's important to me. Because here's the truth. God is genuinely in control. And it's him who makes the choices. And while you were so weak in your sinfulness and your blindness, he chose you. He looked down on this world and he said, I'll have him. I'll have her. I'll have them. And the only reason you chose him is because he chose you first. Glory in that. Honor that. Make that what counts. And happiness. What about happiness? Well, this one may come as a complete surprise to you. This is something that never gets preached out about these days, but the reformers, people like John Wesley and Jonathan Edwards, and these days John Piper, they talk about almost nothing else. Do you know who is the happiest being in the entire universe?